Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Daniel Gormali. Welcome back to my channel, Hometown Chess Hero. Today I want to talk a bit more about calculations. This is part 2 of the video on calculation, and I wanted to talk about falsifying variations. And this was a term that I picked up from a recent book by Michael Adams, where essentially they talked about, it was written by Michael Adams and Philip Hurtado, and was talking about how super grandmasters think about chess. And one of the topics they obviously talked about was calculation, and Adams talked about this term falsification, falsifying variations. I found that very interesting because I noticed in my own games, and also in games of players around about my sort of level, sort of 2400, I would say 2400 to 2550 GMs. You could call them weak GMs or whatever. We often blunder more than someone like Adams. Now, why doesn't Adams ever make silly tactical blunders? Well, because he's using his falsifying technique, and it was explained in the book that what you generally do is you look at the first. You look at a position and you identify candidate move, which you do relatively quickly, but you spend more time falsifying that move. So you spend more time actually trying to break down that move and trying to understand what's wrong with it. In my opinion, that's a very good calculation technique. It's not easy to implement because the human mind tends to be quite lazy in my experience, and tends to be quite, I mean, I've got a very kind of impulsive sense of looking at positions. Anyway, I've been babbling a lot, so I want to try and use this falsification technique, and the way I'm going to use it is on Puzzle Rush survival mode, because 5 minute is all about speed, 3 minute is all about speed, but survival mode we're going to have enough time to try and falsify variations and try and understand what's wrong with them. So initially we probably won't need to do that. Rook c8 is obviously the move. Again, we're just simple. We're starting off with fairly simple moves. That's checkmate. Again, the great thing about survival mode, you can spend as long time, I guess in theory you could spend like several years doing it, right, if you wanted to. Okay, the first move I look at is pawn equals queen, nothing wrong with that. And then push the pawn. Fairly simple. Again, knight takes, is obviously nothing wrong with that move. Queen h7 is correct. Queen takes g2. Now there is something wrong with taking because of the knight, so we falsified that. Queen h5 is obvious. Knight g4. Okay, the first move that screams out is b5 because you're pushing the king. And then Queen h5. Actually using other techniques here in calculation. So on these simpler ones, the very obvious calculation technique I'm using is you're looking for forcing moves, checks and captures. The obvious forcing check is knight g3, so that's obvious. When they take, you go Queen h6. They've only got one move, which is Queen h5 to block it, and then you take the queen. So that's fairly obvious technique. Again, forcing moves, checks and captures. Well, checks and captures, I don't have any useful checks. In fact, I don't have any checks, but I do have this capture, which wins the game. Again, checks and captures. The obvious move is bishop takes e3 because queen g2 I can falsify by virtue of knight takes g2. However, bishop takes e3, trying to distract the queen. So if queen takes, we then would take on g2, it would be checkmate. If you take with a rook, it would be checkmate. But you can take with a pawn, but then I'm calculating that rook d1 works. Because if you take with a queen, I go queen g2, and if you march the king up, I still go queen g2. So bishop e3 is clearly the move. Rook d1 and queen g2. We might get on with these until we get quicker, until we get onto the harder puzzles. Because I'm sure you guys want to look at the harder puzzles, right? Again, queen h7 is going to be good. Yeah, I'm looking for checks. I mean, knight d6 is immediately mate. Checks. I mean, I do have this check, but then it moves the king. But this check looks more powerful, right? Because now I can win the queen. Okay, there's this check. But now, I'll be honest, but there's knight d5, which is checkmate, because it's double check. And now we do the standard, again, sometimes where it's useful, you know, it's always useful not to think, right? If you know the pattern, you don't need to think. So king g6, because I want to facilitate rook g7, followed by rook h8. So, and I'm not worried about rook g3, I'm just going to take it. Again, here I'm looking for the checkmate. Why is this move rook c8 good? Well, it's better than this rook because eventually they'll run back to e1. But if I play this rook, they can't run back to e1. So I'm going to win the game. So I'm up to 28 and no mistakes, which is good. This is tricky because I can't take on d5 because they're going to... So I can falsify that variation because they're then going to take the queen. However, I've suddenly noticed this queen c7. So candidate moves theory, queen c7, I'm seeing an unusual candidate move which I hadn't seen initially. You hit the bishop has to move somewhere, it has to defend c2, it has to come back to b3, but then you go a4, you win the game. So again, like the obvious move now is either e5, but e5 they go bishop e3, so I'm falsifying e5 because bishop e3 I don't have, but if I throw in bishop h6 immediately, that's the way. That is the way, as they say in The Mandalorian. Great show, by the way, if you've never checked it out. Okay, so rook b8 is an obvious starting point. That looks very strong. There is queen c4 now, which actually looks like distraction technique. I've got the 33, but they are getting slightly tougher already. There's queen g2 and bishop takes f3. That looks very strong. Okay, there's knight g6, followed by knight f4, but he'll go king h2 at the end, or they'll go, I should say, they'll go king h2 at the end, or, you know, the algorithm. But the point is, when I take on e2, I'm defending the rook, so I think that's good. There's queen e4 here is the most obvious move I've identified. I think f3 is not a falsification because I'll take the bishop. And d5, I'm taking on f4. So I'm up to 36 now. Now the obvious move is queen e2. I don't see a falsification of that move, so I'm going to go for it. Queen f4 is obvious, but they go bishop e5. Is that a falsification? If I then trade everything off, well, I'm not seeing an obvious win, right? Queen f4, bishop e5. Trade everything off, I don't see a win. So maybe it might not be queen f4. It was the most obvious move to me. There is also rook e1, but somehow I'm slightly concerned they'll just take on e1. I don't see why that's so great. So this is the first puzzle where I've hit a kind of a little bit of a bottleneck. Yeah, I don't see a win here, I must admit. I don't really want to go... Again, you identify candidate moves, so g5 might also be a candidate move, but I think they just take, so I don't see how that helps. But now I'm seeing a move which I didn't see initially, which is bishop d6. Which seems like a better version of rook e1. You hit the queen, if the queen moves... So, yeah, because I was looking at queen f4 initially, but then I had bishop e5, but this, I think, is much stronger. Okay, so now that trying to go in for the mate. However, there's rook g2, you take, queen g2, queen e3, and then you take on c1, and you should be technically winning. Because in fact, you can then exchange queens at the end, and then run through with a g pawn. Okay, one move that screams out at me is rook d7. Rook d7 you take, I check, but then you have... No, but even rook d1 is nothing. Because there's knight d1. So rook c1 is now looking more likely. Okay, there is a line. Rook c1, rook c6, takes on c6, d takes c6, queen b6, king moves, queen e3, easy technical win. But if you don't go rook c6, you're going to have a problem dealing with this threat of rook c8. And if they take on g2, you just move the king. So rook c1 looks like the winning move. So I'm up to 40, no mistake. So the really obvious move here, again, checks and captures rule. The checks and captures rule. Queen b3 is a check. There aren't any really good captures. Knight h7 is not a good capture. Queen d7 is not a good capture. There's no other captures I can see, I don't think. So the check rule is the... And then en passant. As long as you know the en passant rule, that's a fairly easy puzzle. Okay, there's a couple ideas here. One counter move is queen h3. That's the most obvious counter move by far. If you go rook g2, again, forcing moves, checks and captures, rook g2. So that's good because that's a forcing move. But there's a couple of defensive ideas, so they can take rook g8 and then go king h2, and I don't see an obvious way to win. You go knight f3, they just take, and queen e5 they come back. So the obvious move is queen h3, but then you have to deal with queen a8 check. But I think after queen a8 you have knight b8. Oh, they have knight b6, but then you go king c7, knight d5 you take. And when they go b6, you should be able to just go back to c8. So I'll start with queen h3. Then we're going there. Then we're going there. Then we're taking. Okay, yeah, I did see that move, but I thought you could just take that. But actually, you've got to be careful, because if you take, have they got c5? No, c5 you're just going to take, right? So I don't see a good move after taking. You could also go king c8, but I think just taking's good. Yep, so that's all good. So we're up to 42, no mistakes, a good sign. So the first move you look at is the obvious move, which is to take the queen. However, if you take the queen, they take with the rook, and if you go queen c7, they go rook d7. So we're falsifying rook d8 as it's not bad, but it's just not necessarily winning. But queen e5, king f7, then you take. If they take back with a rook, you go check. And then you'll be able to pick up b7, which should lead to a technically winning game. So we go here. Okay, so that's 43, no mistakes. So the first move that's screaming out at me is knight f6, which is double check. That looks completely winning. Knight f6, king d8, queen e8 check. King c7, knight takes d5 checkmate. We're up to 44, no mistakes. Good science. Okay, there's rook takes h6 here. If they take with a king, you go queen h4 or queen g6. Both are checkmate. If they take with a pawn, you go knight f6. King has to go back to h8. Can't go to g5 because queen on g3. And then you go queen g8, mate. So it's rook takes h6. Okay, they've gone knight e4. So the obvious move here is queen d5. I'm not seeing why queen d5. Queen d5 looks winning, right? I may have missed something, but this looks... Okay, they can take that. But I think you don't take on d8 because of knight e2. But I think you can simply take back and then you're technically winning. Okay, so there's ideas like bishop f3 check here. Bishop f3. If they take with a rook, you go rook h2. If they take with a queen, you still go rook h2 and you're winning. I think, can you not take that, right? Okay, so 47, no mistakes, but generally it starts to get hard around about move 50. Okay, there's rook d7. If they take, can you just go back to d6? And then win the bishop. This is maybe my idea. They can take here, but I think that's not going to work. And then just take, right? So 48, no mistake. All looking good. So question here is, where do you put the knight? If you go to g4, not see, knight f3 looks equally tempting, but I think then you can falsify knight f3 on the basis they would go g4. But if they go knight g4, can they bust that idea? Can they bust your variation? I don't see an obvious way that they can do that. So knight g4 looks winning. Okay, so that's good. What about queen h3? First move, check. It seems to be forced checkmate. Queen h3 seems to be winning. Okay, there is bishop takes. I think I've seen this one before. So again, memory plays a role. Bishop h2. It looks very tempting to take on f2 immediately. And I think in like 5-minute puzzle rush or 3-minute puzzle rush, I've often taken on f2 immediately. But I think the idea is bishop f2. If they take with a knight, you take on f2, king h1, knight g3 is checkmate. If they go to h1 after bishop takes h2, so bishop h2, king h1, you still go knight f2, and if they go to f1, you take on f2 is checkmate. So the first move is this. So again, the checks role, the forcing moves, checks and captures is always very useful. So the third, again, checks and captures rule. Well, there's two checks and captures which really stand out, which is one is to take on g3 and the other one is to take on c4. However, the tricky question is, after knight c4, is that obviously winning? If you take on c4, it does look good, but they do have either bishop takes c4 or they can play knight d e4, but obviously a very slow move, because I think if knight d e4 then queen d5 is an easy win, right? But then they can take on c4, queen c4, knight d6. The game does continue, but I suspect white must be completely lost. Okay, so knight c4, I feel like the best move, best try is bishop c4 because that hits a rook. If you take on g3, I think that's winning. So maybe after taking on g3, there is a tricky defense. So I'm going to try this. Now my initial gut feeling was queen d5 was strong because you're hitting the bishop. But is there something that I've overlooked? So I was thinking about bishop takes c4, queen c4, knight d6. But then I think queen c3 should be good. If you take on f7, I can take on either f7 or I can take on g3. Both should be good. You do have this b pawn. That's the only worry. But I think I should probably be able to control the b pawn. I think I'm going to try queen d5. It might be wrong, but if it's wrong, I don't want to be right. As a great man once said, or a great person once said. Was it a man who once said that? If it's wrong, I don't want to be right. Who first came up with that saying? I actually have no idea. It sounds like something Nakamura says in this stream. Okay, rook e8 is possible. Rook e8, rook takes, queen takes, king h7, rook f8. Most forced in variation. I'm threatening rook h8. If you give up the queen, you're busted. Okay, there's knight takes f3 here. However, if knight f3, the reason I can falsify this is queen a4 and queen d1. Whereas I can't falsify knight h3 because after queen a4 you move the king. Queen d1 will not work because the knight takes f2. So again, very easy, very tempting just to go there, but I think this is better. Now bishop g5 runs into bishop takes c5. Is that good enough? It might be good enough. And one thing I could do is I could go bishop g5. If you defend the knight, I will take on f6 and take on d7 and win the game. So it looks like your only move is bishop c5. After bishop f6 check, king c7, the only way to defend the rook. And then take on e5. Maybe this is a better way to play, because then if you go to let's say you go to B, if you go back to C8, I'm just going to take the rook for free, you're not going to be able to recapture. If you go to B7, I can then take on D7 first. So it's probably this move. Yeah, so I'm up to 55, no mistakes, that's good news, however it will get tougher. So there's a couple of moves that stand out here. There's Queen C8, which is tempting. Queen C8, King E7, I don't see anything great there because you're starting to create a lot of serious counterplay. So Knight E4 feels like the correct move. Is there anything else? I mean, Queen C8, King E7. I mean, I can take away your casting rights, but I don't know if that really is that relevant. Okay, what about Knight E4, Queen E4, and simply Bishop D3? I mean, I'm feeling like this is... Because King A1 just feels too slow, right? I feel like Bishop D3 must be the move. Okay, there is Queen C8 and Queen H8. Is that better than take? I feel that might be better than taking and then allowing you to castle. So I'm going to try this move. Okay, 56, no mistakes. Good stuff, right? Yeah, but it's still very tricky, very tricky. What about Knight F6? Knight F6, you can move the king. You can go King F7. There's also Knight E7 here. If Knight E7, Knight takes, then Bishop F6. That looks very promising for white. You can't castle, or you can castle, but you walk into Bishop E7, and then I win the exchange. So it might well just be a simple move like Knight E7, because if you take on G5, surely Knight F5 is winning. Your king's too exposed. Okay, so my initial gut feeling was Bishop takes. I think that's good, yeah. So 57, no mistakes. Looking good so far. However, very tricky position. If you take on... okay, there is one idea, which is the queen. If you take, I take. Can you falsify that variation? You can't take there because it will be forced mate. I take on F2, take on G2. However, you do have Queen D8. Does that help you? Queen D8, maybe I'll go to F7. Because I don't really want to go to G7 because you go Queen E7 and the checks are starting to get very annoying. But if I go to F7, you don't seem to have a useful check. So I think you queen initially, right? I must take. And then I think F7 is probably the only way to win. Because now I can take. So 58, no mistakes. All looking good. This is where it starts to go wrong. As the negative Gormally temperament kicks in. So there is a way to checkmate them. Queen E6, Rook F7, Queen E8, Rook F8, F7, King H8, Queen takes F8, mate. However, after Queen E6, they can go to H8. Can you then take on G7? King takes, go Rook G1. They go back to H8. And there doesn't seem to be an obvious way to crush them. However, there are other ideas, like I could take on G7. Sorry, Queen E6, King H8, take on G7, King takes, there's Queen E7. So I falsified the idea of going Rook G1, but what about Queen E7? Because then if they go to H8, I can take on f8, checkmate. If they go to g8, then I go rook g1. If they go to f7, I then go rook g1. I think that's a mating attack. If they go to h6, I can take on f8 with check. So I think you start with this. And then you go check, yeah, and that's winning, yeah. So far, 59, no mistakes, all looking good, right? But, you know, it will get tougher. Maybe too tough. Okay, there's knight h2 here. But there's also other moves. There's like a slow move here, which is rook e7. Probably knight h2, I think king e4, and there's no obvious forced win. So I'm kind of falsifying knight h2. However, can I falsify rook e7? Because that threatens knight h2. Okay, I'm trying to falsify it, and I'm finding f5 as a move. But after f5, you have knight h2, king f4, rook g4. So I think rook e7 is the move. And yeah, now you go check. I think you always start with a check in this particular variation. Okay, so you check here right now. This is where it gets tricky, because if I go queen f2, they can go knight c e2. That's the falsification, right? And normally in this position, if the pawn was on g2 instead of f3, you could go queen f4 and queen f2 mate. But here that's not possible. So here I really have to think. Which is something I'm not comfortable doing, as we already established. There's also queen g5. But does that really help me? So queen f4 here, they'll go just any move, right? Like king e2. What about bishop e3? No, that's not going to work either. So queen f2, knight c2. Where's the win? I'm not seeing it. I mean, I can make a draw, but... you know, I want more than a draw, yeah? I'm greedy. So queen f2, knight c2. Bishop e3 does king c3. I don't see a win. I've falsified that variation, but even though I've falsified that variation, I've not replaced it with anything better. Yeah, so I'm kind of I'm either overlooking something really obvious here, or maybe I'm just rubbish at chess, right? Okay, queen g5, there's king e1, but you can go queen g2 then, and the rook is trapped, right? And then you win the rook, which should be winning. If they go to g2, it's going to be the same problem. You go, so I think maybe this is the way. Yeah, and they resign, yeah. Okay, again, tricky position. What options do I have? Candidate moves. Knight b5 is an option. Threatening f4. It's not obvious what white's threat is here. I mean, there's other moves like f4, but... I mean, knight b5 does threaten f4, right? So how would they deal with knight b5? They could go g5, but then you go g3. How are they going to defend f4? I don't think they can defend f4. Is there other moves that I'm missing? I mean, this kind of just looks like a normal opening position. It doesn't look like there's anything really going on here. But knight b5 is definitely a possibility. f4, queen a5, I'm not seeing anything special there. Although there is bishop d2, maybe. f4, queen a5, bishop d2, but it feels very slow. Knight b4. I don't know, it just feels very vague. Like, it might be the way though. It is the way. Because knight b5, I'm not totally convinced about either. If f5, then f4. It's either going to be knight b5 or, yeah. Oh, it is this move. Okay, so I'm out of 62 no mistakes, which is good. Okay, there's rook. Okay, the really obvious move here is rook b6. And rook b6, it can't go to. They can't go to b4, queen b4, because if rook takes b4, will be checkmate. However, they can go to b5. After rook b5, they go to a4. How are you delivering checkmate? You've got rook b4, king a5, rook c5, but then they go to a6. And if rook b6, well, I mean, I feel like this must be the correct way, right? I mean, you know, but every juncture, think, is there a stronger move? Is there a way that, you know, I think this must be the correct way. So, again, like here, the most promising move, if I played this in a real game, I would probably go rook b4 fairly quickly. I would check, I would look around. But again, can we falsify that variation? But not really. I mean, rook b4 looks, rook b2 is also possible. I feel like this must be the way. Okay, but now again, like, is there anything better than rook c5? I'm not seeing it. It looks like the most forcing move. Okay, so this is a position where I was a bit stuck. I saw that I had rook b6, king a7, and then rook b2, and I thought that's very promising, but is there anything else? I'm not seeing anything else. There's also rook a4, but then they go to b7. I'm not seeing a forced win. So I'll probably start with this. And now again, I want to take on b2. Okay, but now I can take the check, right? So all checks and fairly easy, and it was a win, right? But now again, like, tricky position. So there's two lines here. One is to check immediately on h6. And the other one is to go queen e1 check. Now if you go queen e1, they go rook g1, queen h4, king g2. Not seeing a killer blow there. So queen e1, rook g1, queen h4, king g2. Because the problem is they defend f3, but you do have ideas like rook f8 there, you know, which do look very promising. But is that necessarily winning? I'm not sure. So what about the other line? The other line is, I said the other one was queen c1. No, queen h6, sorry. Queen h6, king g1. Queen c1. King f2. Is there anything there? I mean, I can take on b2. If I take on b2, let's say you went back to f1. I go check again, you go back to f2. I check you, go back to... Or maybe I can check you on c2 at some point. Because if I check you on c2, where do you go with the king? If you go... Oh, you can still go to f2, right? So after it's queen c2, king f1, queen d1, there's king f2. So this one's all about, I think it's deciding between queen h6 and queen e1. And I mean, you know, it might be some kind of trap. I mean, it's not really traps in Puzzle Rush, but it looks very tempting to, you know, both look very tempting, and I'll probably choose the wrong one, right? Because it doesn't seem clear to me. My calculation's too poor. I can't falsify queen e1 necessarily. I mean, the only falsification after queen e1, rook g1, queen h4, king g2 is the fact I don't see an obvious forced win there. So it's very tempting to go queen h6, king g1, and then queen c1, king f2, take on b2, because you're kind of stuck in a trap. you have to go back to f1, and so I've picked up some pawns along the way. Queen c1, king f2, queen c2. Oh, well, I haven't got queen d1 anyway, because the queen on d5 is defending. So I've kind of falsified that variation at least. So I can do all that. You go to f2, but where is the force win? So I can have a position where I've taken a pawn on b2, I've gone to c1, you've gone to f2, but where's the force win? I don't see a force win there. So maybe to some degree I've falsified that. I mean, there's ideas like bishop c3 there, threatening queen e1, mate. And then if you take on c3, I take back, and I'm many pawns up. Should be winning. How many pawns up there? Even if you take on d6, I'm then 2 pawns up. I'm probably going to go wrong here, but no, that was wrong, yeah. It was probably the other check, which was my gut feeling. There's rook e2 here. That's one idea. Which sets up some kind of combo. But after rook e2 you have knight c3 maybe? Because if you take on e2 I take back. And if you take on c5 I take on f1 checkmate. And if you take on c5 I go queen e4, rook f3 takes, king g1, queen g2 mate. So it's probably wrong one. I'm going to try rook e2. That's also wrong. Yeah, so stupid. I'm not falsifying these at all. Very bad. We're going to have another attempt at some point because this is very, very poor. And now I'm stuck in my worst nightmare, which is rook and pawn endgames. I can't even be bothered to calculate it. I hate rook and pawn endgames. Okay, so this is, yeah, so I can take on b6. So am I trying to win this, am I? What happens if I went h3? h3, bc5, g4, king b7, take on f5, take, h4, king c7, h5, king d7, h6, king e7, h7. I get there first. So I'm going to try h3. And do I get there more quickly if I go f5? If I go f5, you can't go g5 because I go f6. If you take, I go g5. I don't go takes. Ah, finally. So I got the 64, which actually is some kind of record for me. I think my record initially was 63, so at least I've beaten my personal record, so that's something. Okay, there's moves like knight f3 check, but then you go king e2. If I go check, you go king f3. I can force you to h5 or something, maybe. Because I've got a rook g8 in my locker. I mean, surely it must be forcing because, you know, white's a queen up here. If you play a slow move, it's not going to work. So it's got to be forcing moves. So I'll start with this. Again, I've got to force you. I do have a choice here. I could go rook f4, but I feel like I've got to keep going. No! Oh, h5 was the move, you idiots. Oh, you absolute idiot. h5 was the move, and I just went rook g8 very quickly, which is a very easy, so it just shows laziness. Because a very easy move to falsify. Let's have a look at the puzzles that I got wrong. Okay, so we said here that maybe there was a choice between queen e1, which I think was probably... no, hang on. So you play this? So I think it is queen e1, right? And then check. No, hang on. Go back. Yeah, I mean, I did see there was maybe like Queen F2, but I thought actually if they go Queen F2, with the idea that Rook G2, Queen F3, Queen F1 wins, you have Rook H7. And then if King H7 is Queen F7, but maybe there I should have... Oh, but then King H8, of course. Yeah, stupid. So you play a slow move. Ah, and again, yeah, another tricky choice. Do you take? Comes down to calculation. You do take. Okay, but now I can come up maybe. Because you can win A8, but you're going to lose the game. Okay. Hang on. We'll go back to the... how do we go back to Puzzle Rush? We'll go back to Puzzle Rush. But anyway, let's have a look on the leaderboard. Where are we on the leaderboard? No, global. Sorry, global. Oh, I'm in number 1 by a long way as well. So that's good. So I'm in number 1 spot. Could have a quick go of 5 minutes. See if this has warmed me up sufficiently. I do find Puzzle Rush is very addictive. I mean, I think even very strong, super GMs have probably become addicted to this at some point. It's kind of boring but addictive. It's like boringly addictive. So again, checks and captures. Checks. There's obvious check there, and then it's mate. It's like a race that I'm going to win. As Bishop G4, you want to cut off their escape route. It's generally speaking a good idea to get to 20 before you get to... so I got to 20 before I got to 2 minutes. But there's some people that crazy speed demons that I getting to like probably nearly 30 by the time. You see some of these scores in a 3-minute pool, for example. They're crazy, right? So I think a lot of it is just pure speed. I mean, it's just pure unadulterated speed. And Rook D7, is it? There's Rook takes F3, there's Queen check. Okay, here I'm going to try this, but now what do? If I go here, it's not winning, right? Because they take? Oh no, it is winning, sorry. Because your Rook's already on G7, which is quite poor calculation. Now bring the Rook, right? Oh, hang on. Or do I go here because you've got Queen F8, Queen takes. So maybe I have to go here, right? There's Queen E6. Is Queen E7 good here? Or Knight F7? There's Queen D4 check. Okay, there's Knight E3. What about King E6? Queen G5 looks good. I want to take, right? Is Rook F8 the move? Okay. Yeah, Bishop E4 looks the obvious move. There's Rook H3, right? There's Knight F8 here. No, normally you start with that move, don't you? Actually, it's Rook E8, it's mate. There's Queen H6 is looking promising. Take. Okay, that's the standard one. Okay, there's 97 and then take, right? Just use... What about king f3? Now you take and then you take, yeah. Okay, this one I don't know. I presume it's some kind of check here, right? And maybe you take here and then you go like rook f8 and then you win. Okay, there's... No, I don't know this one. It must be some kind of queen trap. There's moves like queen d3, but they don't make much sense. Okay, something where I'm going to win this rook. It's bishop e5 because I need this move. Okay, knight d3. Or is it rook? It's rook e1 and then you take, and then you go here and then you take. There's bishop f4. Does that make any help? No. I was rushing because I'm getting short time. Yeah, this is tough. I don't know this one. I'm probably going to resign, or it's not knight f2, is it? I don't think it's not knight f2. I don't know. If I look at the leaderboard, where am I on the leaderboard? Actually leading on that as well, but it'll get tough. It's probably early in the hour. Because 48 isn't that great anymore. There's so many good players play this Puzzle Rush. Anyway, thanks for that. So that was my falsification. Didn't do a very good job on that one, to be honest. Actually, I might try that again on lead chess, because I'm on the puzzles. I'm already got a high rating. The problem with Puzzle Rush is you've got to go through a lot of relatively easy puzzles, survival mode, to get to the tougher ones. Where if you go on lead chess, or possibly on chess.com as well, you just go straight into the puzzles, then you do get quite tough ones to begin with. So I might try another video. But anyway, thanks again for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. Please click the like button down below. Like the video. Everything's good. I was actually reading about earlier. I was reading about apparently YouTube makes $29 billion a year, and the top streamers are people like, well, the obvious ones, like people like Nakamura's doing very well on YouTube, but Levi Rosnum doing incredibly well. I think he's got over 4 million subscribers, which is insane, and he's got nearly 2 billion views on his YouTube channel. So he's made, as a conservative estimate, several $1 million from YouTube. So it's not bad for a chess YouTuber, is it? I don't really have that kind of ambition to be that successful. But it'd be nice to grow the channel and get, you never know, maybe one day we'll get over 1,000 subscribers, which would be amazing. Because if you get over 1,000 subscribers and start monetizing it, that's all I care about is money. You know, I just want to take your money. But if I can get over 1,000 subscribers, I can monetize the channel, put adverts on there, slow everything down for you, ruin your experience and make loads of money. That's what I'm aiming to do. Thank you.